Hey everybody, my name is Hunter. I am with Helius, and today we're going to be going through some Hyperdrive resources for the hackathon that's taking place through October 15th. This hackathon has 7 tracks that are totaling over $1 million in prizes. With that being said, let's jump into some of the resources. So the first thing that I want to go into here is Solana Playground. This is a web-based IDE where you can launch smart programs on Solana from your browser. And it's really cool just because we can go through, we can create a new project, we could select whether we want this to be in basic Rust, Anchor, which is a framework for building smart programs, and Seahorse, which allows us to build smart programs using Python. So we'll go through, we'll select Rust, we'll pick a project name, and it will give us a basic structure here for a program. If we wanted to, we can go through and build the program here, and it'll give us a program ID, and we can go through and connect a Playground wallet because we'll need to fund deploying the program. And this will cost some DevNet Sol, so you want to make sure that you end up loading up on that for the requirements here for your program. Alternatively, if you wanted to follow a different guide for launching a program here that wasn't in Solana Playground, but it uses it, you can go to the Solana documentation here, and this will end up giving you a quick start guide on how to launch a program and some of the basics for creating one. So this is a really good guide if you just want to go over and pop between Solana Playground and the Solana docs. The next thing that I want to jump into here is the Solana Cookbook, which is a really good site for Solana devs or intro Solana devs where you want to gain really like intro concepts for building on Solana and, different things that pertain to Solana. So this is really good just to go through like, Solana accounts, if you're going to go through like PDAs or, what that entails, and even, giving guides such as like serializing data on Solana, which is really important if you're parsing like raw transactions or if you're looking for raw account data. It's a really good guide just for like going over like different methods here. So I would definitely take a deeper look into these docs. This is a really good basis for, I would say, most Solana devs just to look at. Next, if you're looking at something that's a little bit more pertaining to, collection stats or, NFT stats, what you could do is you can use APIs such as Magic Eden. They have a really good API just for looking at, current floor price, different things that are pertaining to a collection. So you can look at, collection listings, getting activity of a collection. But I would more so just like use these APIs for some stats that don't appear on chain and that are kind of pertaining to these marketplaces. So, Magic Eden has an API, Hyperspace has one, Tensor has an API. I would go through all of those different marketplace APIs and find which, endpoints suit you best. But most times, if you're looking at, any collection-based information or stats, you'll want to use these marketplace APIs. Next, I just want to jump back into the Solana docs and go to the command line wallets and really just like the CLI in general. So, the CLI is a really good tool just because it ends up like walking you through a lot of basic, Solana concepts without having to, write any code. You're just interacting with your terminal. So if you wanted to, you could, download the CLI and they give you, the copy paste commands just to do it. And from there, you can go through different things here and, basically create a wallet, stake your Solana, deploy your program directly from the CLI. You can do a lot of these things, which are really interesting. So next I want to jump into the Solana CLI, which is basically a tool suite where you can end up accomplishing a lot of different things on Solana, from creating wallets to staking to deploying a program. You can just do a lot of very different things. From here, we can end up like installing it. I already have this installed. So if we wanted to, we can, go through here and create a wallet or find one that starts with the letter H, and it'll write, to a JSON pair in whatever directory that I'm working in. So that's like the benefit of the CLI. If I need to, create a wallet or even do something very quick and easy regarding Solana, like if I wanted to create tokens or SPL tokens, I could do that from the CLI, which is awesome. So the CLI is a really good tool, and I would mess around with this a lot and, just get used to, different commands on it and even mint a million SPL tokens and just get used to that. Another important tool set is the Solana JavaScript SDK. This is basically going to allow you to connect to Solana and, do various things from creating key pairs or defining public keys to sending transactions or version transactions and, setting up a lot of those things. This is a really good SDK to go through, and I would expand on this a little bit more, but it's really, 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 really complex. And, depending on what you're building, you'll most likely use this SDK here. So I would say this is a really good dive, just, even as far as looking at, constant updates to it. The Solana JavaScript SDK is one of the more important tool sets that you'll use when building on Solana. Another piece of documentation to get into here would be the shadow documentation. So if you're looking to store anything on Solana and you need decentralized storage, Shadow ends up being a really good option just because you're just paying their token, which is very cheap, and you're able to store large files on Solana. So you could store things that are, 1 gigabyte plus if you wanted to, in their storage buckets. And there's very little limitations that come along with that. So it's a really good option, and you can end up going through like some of their SDKs here for JavaScript and, go through, create a bucket, which is essentially a storage bucket where you can end up, placing files in there. So if you're doing something based off of a collection or based off of a project, you could tie them to the same bucket. And then the file end name is different than something like Arweave, where you're getting that hashed metadata ending, and it's not, predictable. In this case, you're getting a predictable file name and a predictable URL just because it's tying to the storage bucket. So it ends up being really, universal for a lot of applications. Another good API to get familiar with would be the Jupyter API, and this will just allow you to do swaps between tokens on Solana. A lot of applications end up using this, but you could end up putting in something like a Solana address, put in an output for USDC and an amount, and you'll end up getting an output amount. And you can even go through and use their SDK if you wanted to, but I think they recommend you using their API for the moment. So another thing that I want to jump into here is the Helius documentation, and that's just because it gives you a wide array of tools that you can use in your application, ranging from asset information to transaction information, and you can end up getting real-time data from things such as like webhooks or WebSockets. So it ends up being a really important tool suite that I would say is needed for any Solana developer. If you're looking to use the DAS API, where you can end up returning compressed and regular assets, you can end up using, any of these methods to return assets that belong to an owner, authority, creator, or group. If you wanted to exchange some of those parameters there on some of the endpoints, you can end up using the search assets endpoint, and that gives you a differing amount of parameters that you can exchange even between, having a list of NFTs that belong to a certain collection that are owned by a certain wallet. And that ends up being really useful in a lot of different scenarios depending on what you're building. So I would check out this documentation. I would say one of the core benefits of the documentation is that it's pretty much copy paste. So if I was to bring this over here and paste it into a replit, and I was to go through and just copy and paste a regular mainnet RPC, I can go back to the replit here and paste this in. And if I did that, we can end up running it, and we'll end up getting results here from our API. So we end up getting our results here, and we end up getting all the assets that belong to this owner, and we can go through and grab and pick certain things from this. So we can end up grabbing, the images of the assets that belong to that owner, and, the creator or the royalty percentages, or if we wanted to grab anything that relates to even the asset ID or even the image link. These are all important things that you could do from this DAS API and its response. Heading back to some of the other documentation here, we can end up looking at some of the transaction APIs, and from there we can get a parsed transaction history from a wallet address, or if you wanted to input a transaction signature, you could do that and end up getting a enhanced response here. For raw transaction types, you'll end up using something like the RPC, and that's just because you can end up using get signatures for asset, or get signatures for address, and get transaction to return those raw transaction types. So if you needed something that is from a custom program, you'll most likely need to do that. So if you're doing a payment-based app for the hackathon, one of the essential pieces of documentation that you want to look at is the Solana Pay documentation. And from here, you can end up looking up how to incorporate QR codes to accepting payments for certain products that you're selling. And it's a really good piece of documentation to look at. There are various different builds that you can look through as well, and how to accept payments either in person or from your web app. And it's really cool. I would actually dive into some of the builds that people have gone through, and they're really in depth and really different to how they operate. So I would take a look through, one, this documentation, and two, through some like very basic and in-depth builds with Solana Pay, just because you can end up, opening up a world of avenues with your application, and it's really awesome. So this is one piece of documentation that I would definitely take a look at. So with that being said, there's actually way too many pieces of documentation to go through on Solana, and these are just a few to get you started with the hackathon. If you have any questions, I'll end up posting the hackathon Discord in the description below, so you can end up just joining that and asking any questions if you have any. I would also use Solana Stack Exchange, which I'll also link below as well. And I'll link all of the resources that I went through, including the Hyperdrive resources that the Solana Foundation has provided for this upcoming hackathon, which you can look at resources pertaining to certain tracks and basic guides just getting started like I did today. So if you have any additional questions, always let us know, but have fun building for the hackathon.